Right then, bit of a different video, so we'll just go inside. Ooh, that's the best use of this race chip, holding your door open. So, got a Porsche. So this is the 3 litre diesel one, and we'll talk about this first. This came to us for quite a bit of work, which we'll talk about in a second, but the customer said it's got a race chip on there. It gives it another 65 horsepower, so we thought, first job, we'll test that. So we put it on the dyno, and this is the power it got, 273.6. Took it off, put it back to standard, and it did 260, which this is a 258 horsepower car, so that makes sense. It's about where it wants to be. So we've gained, what, 20, 25 pounds-feet of torque and 13 horsepower, 12.8 horsepower if you want to be exact. We're going to have to start breaking it down into decimals. Maybe need to get 2 decimal points with these. So to anybody saying that the last video we did, if you watch that one, was staged and what have you, we get tons of this crap in and they all need to go in the bin, which that sounds broken. So yeah, what we should have done, we didn't have time or we'd have done it, is remapped it as it was standard, and this would have done over 300 horsepower, and then it'd put to bed that they're no good. I'm not saying they ain't got a place in the world, but they're not as good as the manufacturers say. So watch the other video if you want to see that. It was heavily edited to make it into a video that didn't last 5 hours, but we didn't just put them on and take them off like everybody said. This has been on ages. It's learned, self-learned or whatever, adapted, whatever people call it. But read comments, they're hilarious. So, this is a Panamera. It's a true Porsche. It's not like an Audi with a Porsche badge on it like Volkswagen do with a lot of their stuff. So, it's funky. So if you look under here, that's the only Porsche bit about the engine. There's some very strange stuff going on. Look at that boost pipe. It's like crazy. So it splits off, it's got an intercooler either side. So there's a funky setup going on here as well. Another boost pipe down bottom there. Some very, very weird stuff. You can definitely tell this engine was never intended on going into here. So, yeah. So pretty much this engine, it's a CRC, and this is a CRC-C because there's another code, a subcode that's not printed on the engine, which is even more confusing. Which this is identical, pretty much engine-wise, to the KN that we had in a few weeks ago, for pretty much this spec as well. The gearbox is pretty much the same, but these have got like a torque tube, and the gearbox is actually a transaxle at the back. So it's a 8-speed ASIN AL1000 or whatever it is. So it's not a ZF, but 8-speed. They're pretty good, pretty strong. ASIN's like what the V12, V8s and V10s have, so strong gearbox. The engine, standard 258, which I've already said, which is pretty much the same from, I think they do 202 horsepowers in some models, not in the Porsche, but in the Audis, and then they go all the way up to, they do a 300 in these, which is still pretty much the same engine with a few various differences. The main thing to say about these Porsches, the injectors in these are not as big as the 2, 4, 5 horsepower Audis. So that's the limitation of this engine at the minute. These are sort of the same as the 202 horsepower A7s or 212, whatever it is, that many different ones. The turbo's the 2260, which 310 horsepower is about where you want to be. But with these small injectors, that'd definitely be the maximum. So the other mods that we've done to this, pretty easy ones. We've got an upgraded rail pressure sensor, we've got an upgraded map sensor, wherever, I think it's 4 bar that one, and we've put a bigger metering valve in, which is underneath the turbo, and then that's the main mod that we've done here. This is a GTD2872 Turbo, bolts straight on. It's a VZK one, so it's the one with the 2 weird entries. But the other sort of main gripe with the Porsche, this came in, I believe it had a DPF problem, not 100% sure. But this came in for the DPF gutting. And when looking at it, I don't know if we've got any better pictures, but if you can see here, it's just over 2 inches, the diameter. Not even 2 inches there, just as it gets further down. So it's absolutely tiny. So that led us to do a few things that the customer's not asked us to do specifically, but we wanted to do the testing to be sure. But I'll just move the engine cover. While it were all in bits, we've made this downpipe. So this is a full 3-inch DPF delete, obviously reduced down to suit the flange size there. But then at the other end, this drops down to 55mm, which is crazy because, and the exhaust, it's quite small for quite a while. 55mm is what like the 1.6 Fabia Polo would be for stuff like that are. All the 170s and 2 litre, they go up to 57mm. Some of them go up to 60mm. So tiny little exhaust. The customer were quite shocked and surprised that the Porsche had what we'd consider inferior components compared to like an Audi. So an Audi exhaust, 3 litre Audi exhaust is at least 60mm. So a bit strange why they went down to 55mm. But I said when I saw this coming, that were going to be the limiting factor. So we've done a little bit of a test. So we'll just have a look what it's done now as it is and what it did before when we had that fitted. So I've sort of come into this in the middle. So this is as it stands now with a gutted DPF on. So 358.2 horsepower. Also we've lost a little bit of torque right low down, so below 2,500 RPM. But then we've gained tons. We're sort of up at probably 580 pounds of torque at 2,700 RPM, which is pretty good. It'll be nice and a really nice spread all the way to the top, which is pretty nice as standard, but pretty flat. Got nice curves all the way to the top. So this is how it stands now. So when we put the 3-inch downpipe on, not a massive difference, but it's nearly 10 horsepower and probably 15 pounds of torque, but it's everywhere. And the other thing to note as well, that as it is now, it's running 20 degrees hotter EGTs for the same boost levels and everything and fueling, and the turbo vanes to make up for the extra back pressure are closed. I think it worked about 15% more, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough to be a bit concerned to where we're going to have to back a tiny little bit of boost, a tiny bit of fuel out just to bring the EGTs in check, just so we're not going to start hitting the limiter, which that's not going to affect the power. I think Matisse is just in the middle of doing that at the minute, and he took a little bit out and it's made no difference whatsoever. So there's definitely a restriction there in the exhaust. The Cayenne that we did 370 horsepower, but that had a nice exhaust on there that the customer built himself. So yeah, the injector's the limitation there. We're really stretching the injection window to get to that, which obviously makes EGTs high, stuff like that. So I think if we dropped a set of 245 horsepower injectors in there, we'd be knocking on 400 horsepower. If we put a set of our upgraded ones in there, we'd be well over 400 horsepower. Because this engine is pretty good. It's pretty much, the engine's very, very similar to what's like in our V2A5 and stuff, which that's doing 418 or whatever it is. So quite a bit of improvement to be there, but obviously that's going to be expensive to get there. So the customer's happy with this. I've never driven one of these, so if it's still here tomorrow when I'm here, I'm not sure when it's going out. I don't think it's going out today. We'll try and get out and do a little drive in it. I don't think I'm going to do any sort of crazy launching, stuff like that, because it's not the most powerful one. But if you want one of these tuning and you want more than this, expect a set of injectors, expect to do something with the exhaust, and we can definitely make it a lot better. So, see me on the road test. In between filming yesterday's and this, I've contracted what everybody in the world would call coronavirus, but it's just a cold. It's just a cold. So, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll cough a little bit, and then I'll be fine. So, getting in this is like getting in the Cayennes. There's just buttons everywhere. Everything's got a button, and then this has got like, I don't know what spec it's in or how higher spec it is, but you can have another 8 buttons. I don't know what they'd do. That's just there. I'm sure there's other places where you can have more. One thing I've noticed with this, for some reason you put full lock on, skips. And the front tyres are turned wrong. It's pretty quiet. So I'm sort of trying to think where this fits in with the VAG group stuff, as in like what we used to. I think this is sort of a expensive. What was it? There's a tyre can there. I think this is it's in sport. It's pretty peppy, but I think this is an expensive A6 A7 with the power it's got now. It's sort of 3 litre bi-turbo sort of power and torque level, so in theory it should be as quick. Just cruising along, it seems nice. Quite a lot. Quite a lot of road noise. Definitely not as quiet as our A6 one. Should be better is the driving dynamics. The steering's pretty heavy in sport. It's pretty boaty. You have to wobble about a bit. Yeah, I am gonna say, because it's in sport, so the shockers should be as stiff as they can be. Up to now, I'm quite disappointed. We're expecting miracles. They do these with the 4 litre engine from the SQ7, which is the hot V1 with the turbos in the middle. But when they're in these, they're still rear wheel drive and they've not got the 48 volt supercharger. So I don't want to drive one of them. But this, I'm not a fan, so give it another punch and see how it goes. Really happy with the power. Can't really hear the engine much, which is good and a bad thing depending who you are. It just feels so like I could tip it over just checking the steering. It's weird. And that's where I thought this would excel. So I'll say up tonight, I'd rather have an A6. But if you've got one of these and you like it, this turbo does work. They never did the bi-turbo in these, so you've only got this option really. I've not put any timing gear or anything like that because it's rear wheel drive. I'm sure the customer wouldn't like us to be out thrashing us around doing burnouts and stuff. We never bothered to ask. It's pretty quick. Road noise, a bit boaty. I think I'm going to have to reserve judgment on this one. This is not the crazy road test anybody's wanting. I don't really want to go out there going crazy today. And, happy with the speed, not happy with how it feels. We'll try and get one in that's had some mods on it maybe if we're going to do anything crazy. Oh, it's a Porsche, it's got beeps. The beeps are everywhere. It's up here somewhere, somebody put there. I know now. Oh, there's another. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that side. 1, 2, 3, 4 that side. So that's 8. And there's 1, 2, 3, 5 buttons. Is that another button? 5 on the. So 13 buttons that this car hasn't got.
I don't know what that means. Still looks very Audi in this sat-nav. That's the only thing that seems, other than the engine, that seems to be Audi. But yeah. Sorry that this were to crazy road test with power slides and stuff like that, but this is not the vehicle for that. I didn't do anything too crazy, so I don't feel too good. But yeah, the customer's going to pick this up and they're going to be absolutely over the moon. The thing about the tuning box as well, which I probably didn't say when we're in the dyno, I'm not saying they do nothing, but I'm saying the people selling them tell lies, because they never do what they say that they're going to do. So that's why they're better off just being used as a doorstop. They're not worth the money as well, because they're probably 400 quid. You can get a map for 400 quid. And if you want 10 horsepower, a resistor, it goes between the fuel rail and the fuel, between the fuel pressure sensor and the plug. It'll do pretty much that. You need a fully mapped in dodgy thing. So